For 3,000 years, the galaxy believed itself civilized beyond violence. The Eternal Accord, carved in solemn oaths and etched into the archives of every world, declared that no blade would be drawn, no fleet raised, no empire built on conquest. Children were raised on tales of how their ancestors abandoned war for reason, how conflict was reduced to a shameful memory. Generations passed, long enough that the very concept of battle became a myth, like fire to a people who had forgotten its burn. Entire species reshaped themselves around peace, their fleets turned into ceremonial relics, their soldiers melted into scholars, administrators, and philosophers. But peace is not the same as harmony. Beneath the polished veneer of order, resentments festered. While most races grew complacent in their security, one faction saw weakness in stillness. The Threx Dominion, a coalition of predator-descended clans, whispered among themselves that the Accord was a cage, not a sanctuary. They remembered how their ancestors thrived in the crucible of conquest. To them, 3 millennia without war was not progress, it was decay. The Dominion's leaders sharpened their resolve in secret. They studied forgotten military texts, reconstructed fleets under the guise of exploration, bred soldiers in hidden systems. When they judged the galaxy sufficiently softened, they cast aside the Accord. Without warning, their banners darkened the skies of border worlds. The first worlds to fall were undefended, their orbital platforms ornamental rather than armed. Dominion warships descended like carrion birds, and within days, cities that had not known fear in 100 generations burned. The message was broadcast across the stars: the Accord was over. The Council of Races convened in chaos. Panic filled the chambers as ambassadors shrieked of annihilation. Some demanded immediate surrender, others proposed appeasement. Their voices wavered not from courage but from the sheer absence of precedent. No one alive had ever fought a war. No one, except the humans. Humanity had joined the Accord only a few centuries earlier, arriving from the spiral's edge with a reputation for volatility. The Council had tolerated them as eccentric newcomers, tolerated their blunt manner, their restless ambition, their noisy emotions. To the older civilizations, humans were strange, too quick to argue, too fond of competition, too reckless with risk. When humanity spoke of their bloody history, others dismissed it as grotesque entertainment. War was dead, after all. Why obsess over it? Now the Dominion's fleets spread terror, and eyes turned toward the humans. Everyone expected dread. Everyone expected silence. What they saw instead made them doubt their senses. The humans laughed. When the Council broadcast the footage of burning colonies, the chambers filled with gasps, with tears, with frozen horror. But the human delegation leaned back in their seats, exchanged glances, and chuckled as though hearing the punchline of a cosmic joke. Their ambassador's grin was so wide the others thought he had lost his mind. News of humanity's reaction spread faster than the Dominion's fleet. Reports came from every station, human citizens mocking the Dominion in taverns, comedians cracking jokes on open networks, soldiers volunteering for service with smiles on their faces. Even as images of carnage played, humans treated it as though they had been waiting for this moment all along. To the other races, this was unthinkable. War was horror. War was tragedy. How could anyone laugh? Some whispered that humanity was broken, scarred by a history they never truly healed from. Others argued it was denial, a final gasp before collapse. But the humans knew differently. Their laughter was not madness, nor was it ignorance. It was recognition. Humanity had never erased its history of struggle. Their monuments, their stories, their very culture was woven with the thread of conflict. To them, war was not an ancient nightmare, it was an old acquaintance returning. As the Dominion celebrated their early victories, as the Council drowned in indecision, a quiet certainty spread among humans everywhere. This was not the end of peace. It was the beginning of their element. The Dominion thought war would terrify the galaxy into submission. They expected trembling, surrender, hopelessness. But in humanity's laughter, the Dominion had awakened something older than the Accord, older than 3,000 years of peace. They had awakened a species who had never stopped preparing, even when the rest of the galaxy forgot what preparation meant. And for the first time in millennia, the galaxy trembled, not at the conquerors, but at the humans who smiled in the face of war. The galaxy struggled to understand why humanity laughed. To most species, conflict was unimaginable, a concept confined to archives and children's cautionary tales. To see humans grin while the Dominion shattered worlds felt like witnessing a creature grin while drowning. Scholars convened emergency sessions to analyze the phenomenon, projecting theories with frantic urgency. They said it must be denial, the last defense of fragile minds unable to process terror. They claimed it was cultural malfunction, a side effect of a violent history. Yet none of their theories matched the evidence. Because the humans were not trembling, they were preparing. Everywhere, alien observers reported the same strange behavior. Human soldiers sang bawdy songs as they loaded weapons. Officers told jokes over encrypted comms, sometimes with timing so sharp that whole squads laughed on the eve of deployment. Even civilians, instead of wailing in despair, filled public feeds with satire about the Dominion's arrogance. They mocked their enemy openly, turning them into caricatures. A war that paralyzed ancient empires became, to humans, material for humor. For beings raised in peace, the effect was disturbing. Fear had always been the most reliable weapon. Even the Dominion counted on it, knowing that terror would hollow out their foes before the first shot was fired. And yet, the humans were not hollow. They seemed stronger for it, their unity hardening with each laugh. What outsiders mistook for madness was, in truth, resilience. Humanity's relationship with war was unlike that of any other civilization in the Accord. While others had allowed centuries of peace to erase their violent pasts, humans had never abandoned the memory of their struggles. Their history was steeped in it, and they had preserved it, not as shame, but as instruction. Museums, stories, even casual language carried echoes of conflict. Where other races let time smooth away their scars, humanity kept theirs uncovered as reminders. To them, war was not a myth. It was survival. Their species had clawed through ice ages, plagues, and invasions of their own making. Entire continents had been shaped and reshaped by battle, and every step toward modernity was paved in blood. The Accord thought this fixation grotesque, a dangerous obsession. Yet in the moment of crisis, it became their strength. Humans had rehearsed fear for millennia. Now, fear no longer ruled them. The laughter carried a message: we have been here before. It was not the nervous chuckle of weakness but the bark of recognition, the grin of a veteran seeing an old opponent step back into the ring. For humanity, war was not an uncharted abyss, it was a well-mapped battlefield, and their ancestors had left them a library of strategies, songs, and scars to navigate it. Where others froze at the unknown, humans laughed because they understood the game. Alien intelligence agencies grew more concerned as reports accumulated. They intercepted human transmissions during mobilization. Jokes laced every exchange, pilots teasing each other as they launched into battle, engineers quipping about the Dominion's poor ship design, Marines betting on who would board enemy vessels first. From the outside, it looked unhinged. From the inside, it was cohesion. The humor bound them together, dissolved fear, and turned chaos into camaraderie. A human general summarized it best when confronted by alien counselors who accused his people of treating war as a sport. He answered calmly, "We don't laugh because it's funny. We laugh because crying won't help. We laugh because our ancestors faced worse with less. We laugh because fear feeds the enemy, and laughter starves it." Those words spread quickly across neutral networks. Some races dismissed them as bravado, but others felt a strange stirring within themselves. Could laughter truly be a weapon? Could defiance be stronger than dread? For species that had lived in softness for millennia, it was a revelation. Meanwhile, the Dominion misread everything. They saw the laughter as weakness, mistaking humor for cowardice. To them, warriors were supposed to roar with fury or bow in submission. A soldier who chuckled while charging into fire was inconceivable. So they pressed harder, doubling down on threats and devastation, certain that humanity's laughter would eventually collapse into silence. But humanity's grin only widened. Every new loss, every new atrocity, became fuel for their dark jokes, sharpening their resolve. They were not laughing at war, they were laughing through it. And in doing so, they made themselves untouchable. For the first time, whispers spread among the council. Perhaps these humans were not broken after all. Perhaps they were something else, something the galaxy had forgotten how to be. The laughter was not denial. It was readiness. And readiness, more than any fleet or weapon, was what the Dominion feared most. The Dominion believed numbers would guarantee victory. Their war doctrine was built on overwhelming force. Flood the skies with ships, strike with precision, crush resistance before it could breathe. Against empires softened by peace, this approach had worked flawlessly. Worlds capitulated at the sight of their armadas. Terror alone had been enough. But when their fleets met humanity, the old formula failed. The first human carriers emerged from slip space not in solemn silence but broadcasting music across open channels, ancient war songs laced with mocking lyrics. Their ships bore names that baffled and infuriated Dominion commanders: the IRS audit, oops, all nukes, your mom. What was intended as intimidation became humiliation. Dominion officers, trained to expect fear, heard laughter echoing across comms instead. Then the battle began. Dominion gunners fired salvos meant to tear apart enemy formations, confident in their superiority. Yet the humans didn't hold still, didn't follow predictable doctrine. They darted through fire with maneuvers so reckless the Dominion thought them suicidal. But the chaos was calculated. Every insane dive, every sudden turn, forced Dominion ships into unfavorable positions. Where other races valued order, humans thrived in disorder, turning unpredictability into a weapon. Boarding parties drove the point deeper. Human marines launched themselves into enemy hulls with laughter audible even over weapons fire. They sang as they breached, taunted their opponents as they advanced. Dominion soldiers, conditioned to expect terrified prey, found themselves facing enemies who grinned through blood and smoke. The effect was corrosive. Morale faltered as Dominion troops began to question whether they were fighting soldiers or madmen who could not be broken. The humans paid in lives, but they paid gladly. Losses that would have shattered other species only seemed to strengthen their resolve. Instead of silence, human channels filled with more jokes, more songs, as if defying death itself. A pilot whose squadron was cut in half laughed before ramming his burning fighter into a Dominion cruiser's bridge. His last transmission was not a scream but a sarcastic remark about their terrible aim. To the Dominion, this was incomprehensible. To the humans, it was proof that even in death, fear would not claim them. Observers from the council watched the first major clash in stunned silence. They had expected humanity to crumble, perhaps to lash out before being annihilated. What they saw instead was a demonstration of ferocity wrapped in humor. Human fleets refused to fight the way doctrine dictated. They blended centuries of ancient tactics with innovations no alien academy had ever considered. Guerrilla strikes, feints disguised as blunders, traps sprung with suicidal confidence. Every maneuver carried the same unnerving energy. Humanity was enjoying itself. The Dominion retreated, not because they were decisively beaten, but because they had been rattled. They had inflicted heavy casualties, yet the humans laughed louder at every strike. The psychological dominance they relied upon was gone. They had expected prey and found predators who mocked them. In the aftermath, transmissions spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Clips of human soldiers joking mid-battle, of officers issuing orders between bursts of laughter, of civilians cheering news of clashes instead of mourning. Every image challenged millennia of assumptions. To the Accords races, war was a nightmare that had returned. To humanity, it was a stage they had always been ready for. The Dominion strategists tried to rationalize the failure. They told themselves it was an anomaly, a single unpredictable clash. But doubt seeped through their ranks. Commanders asked why human soldiers never showed fear. Analysts demanded explanations for tactics that broke every rule. And quietly some admitted a truth they dared not speak aloud: they were facing an enemy who could not be intimidated, only fought to the very end. For humanity, the battle was only a beginning. They had revealed their hand, shown the galaxy that laughter was not madness but a declaration. To them, war was not the return of chaos but the return of familiarity. Where others saw apocalypse, humans saw opportunity. And as word spread of the clash, the Dominion's reputation of invincibility began to fracture. What terrified the galaxy most was not the Dominion's aggression. It was the realization that humanity did not just endure war. Humanity excelled in it. The shock of humanity's first victories spread faster than fleets could travel. The Accord had long believed the Dominion's power absolute, that once the pact of peace was broken, no force could stand against the old war-born predators. Yet broadcasts of human defiance contradicted every expectation. Where others had collapsed in fear, the humans had answered with laughter and victory. Entire civilizations struggled to reconcile what they had witnessed. In council chambers, debates turned frantic. Some ambassadors demanded that humanity be restrained, fearing that the same ferocity turned against allies would be catastrophic. Others urged immediate support, claiming only humans had the will to confront the Dominion directly. The older races, dulled by peace, found themselves paralyzed by indecision. It was not merely the Dominion they feared now, but the unpredictable species that had proven immune to terror. Among the Dominion, confusion deepened. Their strategy relied on psychological superiority, but humans inverted every expectation. Propaganda campaigns depicted them as deranged primitives, laughing lunatics marching to their deaths. Yet the message backfired. Instead of isolating humanity, the image spread across neutral worlds and ignited fascination. Civilians across the Accord began repeating human slogans, mimicking their jokes, even humming their war songs. The more the Dominion tried to paint them as insane, the more their defiance became legend. Alien soldiers, long untested by real battle, began to look at humans with a mix of awe and envy. For centuries, they had been told war was a nightmare that must never return. Now they saw comrades who treated it not as curse but challenge. The laughter that once seemed grotesque became strangely liberating. Some units, inspired by human example, began adopting small rituals of their own, singing before combat drills, speaking defiantly of the Dominion instead of whispering its name. A spark of courage, unfamiliar yet contagious, spread across armies that had never before faced fire. What disturbed the Dominion most was not the tactical threat, but the cultural shift. Every battle where humans fought, they carried their irreverence like a weapon. When ships fell, they mocked the losses as setbacks barely worth mourning. When cities burned, they swore vengeance with humor sharp enough to sting. Each jest undermined the Dominion's aura of inevitability. Fear, their most reliable tool, was slipping from their grasp. Commanders reported soldiers hesitating before assaults on human-held positions, reluctant to face enemies who seemed unbreakable. Rumors spread among Dominion ranks that humans were possessed, immune to pain, incapable of despair. Superstition began to infect the disciplined war machine, eroding the confidence that had carried them through their first conquests. Leaders demanded explanations, but none could be given. How could they quantify laughter as a weapon? Meanwhile, within the Accord, a new title began to circulate, the Laughing Legion. It was not humanity's own name, but one bestowed by alien observers who struggled to define what they were seeing. The moniker carried both fear and admiration. To call them a legion was to acknowledge their martial strength. To call them laughing was to admit their greatest power was not weaponry, but spirit. For many species, this redefined the very concept of war. If fear was no longer inevitable, then perhaps resistance was possible. If death could be met with humor, then survival was no longer the only measure of victory. The Accord's younger generations, raised in peace but restless under the Dominion's shadow, embraced the idea with startling enthusiasm. Recruitment swelled, inspired not by speeches from timid leaders, but by recordings of human voices joking in the heat of combat. The Dominion's leadership convened in frustration. Their empire had expected quick submission. Instead, they faced a threat that multiplied not through numbers, but through influence. Every human victory, however small, inspired others to fight harder. Every laugh that echoed through the void weakened the Dominion's grip on fear. They realized too late that they had not just broken a treaty. They had awakened something buried, something the Accord had tried to forget. The galaxy now understood what the Dominion never had. Humanity's strength was not simply in their weapons or tactics. It was in their refusal to surrender to despair. Their humor was defiance made audible, and every ally who heard it found themselves braver than before. The balance of power had shifted. And for the first time since the war began, the Dominion looked into the void and wondered if they had unleashed an enemy that could not be stopped. The Dominion's war machine, once unstoppable, began to fracture under the weight of something they could not measure. Victory had always been a matter of overwhelming firepower and fear, yet neither seemed effective against a species that turned dread into a joke. With every campaign, humanity drew more allies to their side, not through diplomacy or promises, but through sheer example. Soldiers who once trembled found themselves grinning as they marched alongside humans. Commanders who hesitated now issued orders with a steady voice, convinced that courage could be learned. The coalition offensive formed faster than anyone predicted. Fleets that had sat dormant for centuries were rearmed under human guidance. Old defense platforms were retrofitted into weapons of war, their alien crews now practicing battle drills with uncharacteristic eagerness. Humanity became the spearpoint of this new alliance, not because they demanded it, but because no one else could fill the role. Their presence transformed the mood of entire campaigns. Where despair once lingered, their laughter replaced it. The Dominion recognized the shift, but could not reverse it. They threw more ships into combat, hoping sheer attrition would exhaust their enemies. Instead, their losses mounted. Human-led strikes pierced deep into their supply lines, daring raids that shredded logistics and left proud fleets stranded. Boarding parties targeted command ships, laughing as they tore through elite guards, toppling officers who had never before known the humiliation of being hunted. The Dominion's leaders tried to rally their people with fiery declarations. They spoke of glory, of the weakness of the Accord, of the need to crush humanity before their defiance spread further. But the words rang hollow. Even among their own, doubt grew. Veterans muttered that humans were unnatural, enemies who seemed to thrive on suffering. Some whispered that they were not fighting mortals at all but beings forged from conflict itself. The psychological fracture widened until entire units broke under the pressure, surrendering in disbelief that they had ever thought victory assured. The final campaign came not with a single climactic strike but with relentless erosion. Humanity's coalition pressed forward system by system, carving through strongholds once deemed impregnable. Each conquest carried the same signature, the sound of human voices mocking the very notion of defeat. The Dominion's commanders could predict ship movements, estimate weapon ranges, calculate probabilities, but they could not calculate the effect of laughter echoing across the stars. It gnawed at them, reminding them that their enemies had stripped away their greatest weapon, fear itself. When the Dominion's core world finally fell, it was not marked by silence but by the sound of cheers carried across coalition channels. Even in the shadow of immense destruction, humans did not gloat with solemnity. They cracked jokes about the futility of tyranny, about the absurdity of an empire undone by its own arrogance. To outsiders, it looked disrespectful. To their allies, it was the final affirmation of what humanity had always shown, that despair was optional, and defiance was victory in its purest form. The Accord reconvened after the war, determined to rebuild. The eternal accord had been shattered, its illusion of permanent peace destroyed. Yet in its place rose something stronger, the understanding that peace could never be taken for granted. It had to be defended, and humanity had proven not only willing but eager to take that burden. Once dismissed as reckless newcomers, they now stood as the guardians of resilience. No longer were they regarded as unpredictable children of the spiral. They were the species who had faced war with a grin and taught the galaxy to stand tall again. In the centuries to follow, historians would debate the war endlessly. They would analyze strategies, record casualty lists, and document shifting borders. But among common people, the memory was simpler. They recalled the strange newcomers who did not bow when terror returned. They remembered the voices carried across calms, cracking jokes as ships burned, making light of the darkness itself. They remembered the laughter that spread like wildfire until entire civilizations discovered that courage was contagious. The Dominion had set out to prove peace was weakness. Instead, they had uncovered a truth older than treaties and stronger than fear. Humanity did not deny the chaos of war, they embraced it, mastered it, and bent it into a weapon no empire could counter. And so the galaxy learned to laugh alongside them.